We go into rooms and we shrink ourselves. We don't want to impose. We don't want to be confrontational. We don't want to interrupt the status quo. And so we shrink our skills. We shrink our ability. We shrink the power of what we're able to do. Do not do this. So what's a more appropriate way of having a high-level conversation without offending everybody in the room? Here's what you need to do. Hey, it's Alze Calhoun with Coveted Consultant. Let's talk about how to own a room. This scenario comes to mind for me because I was walking a client through a situation, and I think the framing of that situation can also be helpful to you. He was going into an interview with a larger company that was looking to essentially buy him out of his business. Since he's already proven some aptitude for running his own company, the larger company thinks hiring him will give them more speed. So the conversation with my client is, how do you navigate this interaction? He probably doesn't want to be bought out by the other company. He likes where he is, but he knows that his industry is small and he'll see these folks again, and he doesn't want to burn any bridges. The question becomes, how do you resonate in that room without offending anybody, possibly saying no without offending anybody, but still maintaining the highest level relationship? Well, let's get into it. So what we talked about, first of all, was that you have to be prepared. Now, this sounds so obvious, but let's break down what prepared means. What do you want? There's a reason why they want to talk to you. They want something from you. There's a reason why you want to talk to them. You want something from them. Just be honest with yourself. Do that research. Do the introspection. Sit down for a second and write out, what do you want from them? What do they want from you? To be more specific, why does this particular person want to talk to you in particular? What specifically can the two of you get done that another pair of people cannot get done? Now, that answer may not be obvious, but there is an answer. So just do some research, do some thinking to consider what unique opportunity is present because the two of you are working together. Final note here is, and I tell my clients this a lot, you don't have to do anything. So just because they invited you to a room and just because you accepted the invitation to come does not obligate you to anything, doesn't obligate them to anything. You don't have to do anything. In fact, you don't know what you might do until you have this interaction. It's really important to get your head clear about this up front. What do they want from you? What do you want from them? And no matter how that math shakes out, you don't have to do anything. So now you have clear, objective research, clear, objective preparation for the interaction you're about to have. Let's talk about walking into a room with confidence. Where does confidence come from? That's one of those things we all think is mystery or magic. Let me try to give you a simple definition here. Confidence is the outward expression of your preparation. You cannot fake confidence. You cannot manifest or manufacture confidence. It is the outward expression of your preparation. The better prepared you are, the more confident you will be in that space. So when you walk in the room, you're just playing out a scenario you've already prepared for. Now, the obvious here is to dress for the occasion, shake hands, and make eye contact. This is classic professional one-on-one, but sometimes we forget how important those initial moments are. So do you look like someone who is prepared to do business? When in doubt, overdress. If you look around the room and realize that you're overdressed, there are things you can do to tone down your look. You can take off your jacket, remove your tie, things like that. But if you look around the room and you're underdressed, it's really hard to now turn up the professionalism. At a minimum, you've shown the person you're talking to that you have actively prepared for the occasion. Your dress tells them that. Shake hands, make eye contact, begin pleasantries. This is the human moment that we're having here, so it's really important that you show up like a human, right? And keep the pleasantries simple and brief, right? Hello, how was the drive-in? Did you see the game last night? How was your family? You're just looking for a positive moment to share with the other person. If you need to, prepare these answers, right? Just short, brief, tight answers. I know these things are simple, but when you get these micro moments right, you find that there's momentum in your conversation. When you get these micro moments wrong, you find the conversation derailing and going off track. So take the time to just settle yourself and prepare yourself for the best conversation possible. Now, there will be a point where the energy shifts and the real conversation begins. And for that moment, you need a game plan. So let's talk about what that game plan should look like. I'm telling you what I told my client. Take control of the conversation. And here's where things get a little weird. There are two classic routes that people take in this moment, and both of them are bad. Most people think that they need to walk into the room and tell the other person how phenomenal their experience is, how phenomenal their resume is, how long they've been in business, how amazing they are. They call this peacocking. This is what male peacocks do in order to impress female peacocks. It makes them appear bigger than they are. I know there is immense pressure to do this because you want to be impressive to the other person. But people can see when you're peacocking. It's a bad deal. Please do not do this. But for those of us who do not want to be seen as a peacock in this way, we do the exact opposite. We go into rooms and we shrink ourselves. We don't want to impose. We don't want to be confrontational. We don't want to interrupt the status quo. And so we shrink our skills. We shrink our ability. We shrink the power of what we're able to do because, again, we don't want to ruffle any feathers. This is also a bad idea. Do not do this. So what's a more appropriate way of having a high-level conversation without offending everybody in the room? Here's what you need to do. You need to begin the conversation with the research you've already done. Hey, I've been doing some research about this situation, and here's what I understand. I understand A, I understand B, I understand C. Then you should stop and confirm what you've said. Do I have that right? Do I understand that correctly? Is this really who you are? Are these the things that are most important to you? Is this the goal you're trying to get done? Can we better understand that together? The second part of the conversation is about priority. So now that we understand that we have the right case facts, we have the right data to begin this conversation, what's most important? Which element of what we just discussed is the most important thing you are trying to get done in the short term? The next part of that conversation is, what do you need from me? Right? What do you need from me to make this real for you? What do you expect me to do? What expertise do you expect that I bring? What experience are you expecting from me? Just bottom line, what do you need from me in order to get that important thing accomplished? The final part of that conversation is what do you provide to make that happen? So you need certain things from me. Well, great. So what are you going to provide so that I can do what needs to be done? This is that conversation around salary, compensation, structure, team, vacation days, all those, all that money stuff that we want to talk about. That's where that finally lands. But notice we didn't get to anything about money until we better understood what was at stake and what the priority of those stakes are. Now, if you're like my client, you're still feeling a little uncomfortable here. You see the framework, that kind of feels good to you, but the idea of confronting another professional is still a bit weird. So the follow-up question he asked me was, Alzay, when do I start this? Like, when do I start, just like from the very beginning, from the initial? So here's what I said to him. You begin this framework the moment the two of you sit down. So you're having this conversation and you are going to probably start it standing, right? You meet him, he meets you, and you shake hands, pleasantries, right? You do all of that. But then there's a moment where he's going to offer you a seat, and he takes a seat. And the moment y'all sit in that chair, the real conversation begins. Whatever the next question you are asked is the beginning of the real conversation. No matter what that person asks you, your response is the same. If they ask you the weather, if they ask you about your background, if they ask you to tell you about themselves, they ask you how business is going, it doesn't matter what they ask you. The moment you sit down and they ask you a question, you directly answer what they've asked, because you don't want to be rude. You directly answer what they've asked, and then you begin with the research you've done, and you begin the appropriate framework. You are trying to take control of the dialogue that happens in this room. You're not trying to tell them what to say or tell them what to think. You're trying to give this dialogue shape so that it leverages both of your time. In fact, let's talk about that. Let's talk about why we function this way. Why is it so important to own the room? Why is it so important to function in this very specific way? Let me give you a couple of reasons why this method of functioning is so important. First of all, is most meetings have no agenda. Most professional meetings you walk into do not have an agenda. And even if there is an agenda, people are too willing to throw that agenda out of the window. They're not committed to the agenda. So what you have are these misdirected meetings. We never actually get around to talking about what we're supposed to talk about. We never actually get enough depth on the topic at hand because we weren't focused enough on getting to that depth. And have you ever had this happen? Have you ever been in a meeting where it took 45 minutes to get to the point? But now that you finally got to the point, the meeting's over. So what if we got to the point in the first 5 minutes, and then we can spend the next 40 minutes really getting some depth, some detail, and some understanding on that point? The meeting must have an agenda, and you cannot depend on the other person to have the agenda. Your job is to have the agenda. Good news for you, the agenda is more or less the same every single time. So be assertive, be aggressive, be professional, be confident in that agenda because you're trying to get the most ROI on both people's time. Second major point here is that the real you, the real person, can't be understood in 45 minutes. So if we're trying to make this major economic transaction, if we're going to spend a lot of money or dedicate a lot of time to doing something important, and they're trying to understand who you are, they're not going to get all of you understood in 45 minutes. It can't be done. So help them curate your experience. Curate your knowledge and expertise. Synthesize how great you are for them. Prepare accordingly. And so not only in what you say, but also what goes unsaid allows you to communicate the highest level of professionalism possible. So they may not know everything about you, but how they feel about you will be fundamentally different. So you've communicated everything without having to communicate everything. The real you can't be understood in 45 minutes, so don't take that risk. Curate, synthesize who you are, prepare accordingly, and then you can be awesome and powerful in that short, tight meeting that you're having. Third part here is if there's no dialogue, then there's no relationship. Professionals who work together have to be able to work together. They've got to be able to talk to one another. And the outline that I gave you in this video gives you a format or a framework to actually have some dialogue. You talk, they talk. You talk, they talk. You understand, they understand. You understand, they understand. So this gives both of you a snapshot of what it would feel like to actually work together. But if you don't have that kind of dialogue, what ends up happening is they just throw questions at you, and then you have to respond to the questions they ask you. Are you really learning about them? Are they really learning about you? You need a better framing that gives both parties a better understanding of what it's like to actually work together. You need dialogue in order to understand or appreciate the possibility of a good working relationship. Bottom line here, owning a room is a dynamic idea, but if you prepare accordingly, you can represent the most powerful elements of your professional expertise. It's worth your time to do it the right way.